I don't think I know who you are anymore. The words echoed in my mind long after Mark had fallen asleep beside me. His breathing was soft, steady, completely oblivious to the storm raging inside my chest. I stared at the ceiling, the weight of his accusation pressing down on me like a boulder. My stomach twisted with the sharp sting of guilt, but it was too late for guilt now, too late for everything. My phone buzzed softly on the nightstand, and instinctively I turned to check it. The screen lit up with a single message. I can't stop thinking about you. Meet me tomorrow? Michael. I silenced the phone immediately. I wasn't sure what bothered me more, that I didn't feel any surprise seeing his name pop up at this hour, or that part of me was excited he'd reached out at all. I turned back to Mark, watching his chest rise and fall in the dark, his face peaceful and unsuspecting. Guilt gnawed at me, as it always did, but it no longer stopped me. I had crossed the line long ago, and there was no coming back. But it hadn't always been this way. It started with a lie, a small one that seemed so harmless at the time, one I could justify to myself. Mark was supposed to come with me to the charity gala, but when his meeting ran late, I found myself standing alone in the foyer, adjusting my dress and pretending to be more confident than I felt. The event was filled with polished executives and their wives, and I hated going to these things alone. It made me feel exposed. Then I saw him. Michael was standing by the bar, speaking with my boss, his dark eyes scanning the room. He was older than the other men, but there was something about the way he held himself that made you notice him immediately. The way he dominated the space without speaking too loudly, how the crowd seemed to shift to accommodate him. I didn't expect him to notice me, let alone approach me. But he did. Alone tonight? His voice had a rich depth to it, and I found myself meeting his gaze, startled by the intensity in his eyes. My husband's working late, I replied, trying to sound casual. I took a sip of champagne to fill the sudden nervousness in my throat. That's a shame, he said, his lips curving into a smile that was both charming and dangerous. He's missing out. It was a harmless comment, right? One that could be easily brushed off. But the way he said it made my pulse quicken. There was something in the air between us, a subtle energy, something that sparked without warning. I should have walked away then. I should have excused myself and disappeared into the crowd. But I didn't. Instead, I stayed. For the rest of the evening, I found myself glancing at him more than I should have, wondering what it was about him that held my attention so completely. And when he caught me staring, the way his smile deepened made it clear that he knew exactly what he was doing. The text started innocently enough. A week after the gala, a message popped up on my phone from an unknown number. Had a good time at the gala. Would love to continue our conversation over lunch. I knew who it was immediately. My heart raced, and for a moment, I considered not responding. I thought of Mark, sitting in the other room, working late on some project. I knew this was dangerous territory, but something inside me, some restless part of me that craved more, wanted to see where this would lead. I replied, "Sounds good. Tomorrow at noon?" Lunch turned into a weekly thing. Each time we met, the tension between us grew. Michael would ask about my life, my work, my marriage, and I'd find myself opening up to him in ways I hadn't with anyone, not even Mark. He really listened, and when he looked at me, it felt like he saw me, really saw me, in a way that Mark hadn't in years. It wasn't long before the lunches became more than just conversations. We met one afternoon at a quiet restaurant far from the city center. Michael arrived a few minutes after me, flashing me that knowing smile as he sat down. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice low and warm, like a secret only we shared. I blushed, something I hadn't done in years. "Thank you." As we ate, our legs brushed under the table, the small touch sending shivers down my spine. I knew what was happening, knew what was building between us, and yet I did nothing to stop it. I wanted it, wanted him. After lunch, he suggested a walk. We wandered through a nearby park, the crisp autumn air biting at my cheeks. We didn't talk much, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. Instead, it felt charged, like both of us were waiting for the inevitable. When we reached a secluded part of the park, Michael stopped, turning to face me. "I can't stop thinking about you," he confessed, his voice deep, his eyes dark with intensity. "Tell me I'm not the only one feeling this." I should have said something, should have walked away, but instead, I stepped closer. His hands found my waist, and suddenly, his lips were on mine, soft and demanding all at once. I kissed him back, my body pressing into his, the sensation of him overwhelming me. It was like everything I had been missing, everything I had pushed down, came rushing to the surface in that kiss. For the next few minutes, we lost ourselves in each other, our hands exploring, our breaths ragged. When we finally pulled apart, both of us were breathless. "This is dangerous," I whispered, more to myself than to him. He nodded, his hand still resting on my hip. "I know, but I don't care." The affair started that day, though I had already crossed the line long before. We met in secret, cheap hotels, his office, places where no one would recognize us. Each time the thrill of it consumed me, made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. But the guilt was always there, lurking in the background, a constant reminder of what I was doing, what I was risking. At home, things with Mark began to change. He noticed, of course, how distant I had become, how often I worked late or came home tired from meetings. He didn't question me, not at first, but I could see the doubt in his eyes, the quiet suspicion building. One night, as I lay in bed next to him, my phone buzzed. I glanced down at the screen, seeing Michael's name, and quickly silenced it. But it was too late. Mark had seen it. "Who's that?" he asked, his voice quiet but tense. "Just someone from work," I lied, turning away from him. Mark didn't say anything, but the silence that followed was heavy. I could feel the space growing between us, the unspoken tension building with each passing day. Months passed, and the affair continued. Every time I was with Michael, I felt guilty, but the pull of him, the excitement of our secret, was too strong. It became something I craved, an escape from my marriage, from the routine that had once felt comforting but now felt suffocating. But I couldn't keep the secret forever. One evening, I returned home after spending hours in Michael's arms. The guilt sat heavy on my chest as I unlocked the front door, stepping into the quiet of our home. Mark was waiting for me in the living room, sitting on the couch with a glass of whiskey in his hand. The look in his eyes told me everything. I didn't need to say a word. "I don't think I know who you are anymore,"